Imagine standing across from a warrior who has never lost a fight in 62 bloody duels against some of the deadliest fighters in history. They used spears and blades of all types against him, but every single one of them fell to that warrior named Miyamoto Musashi. He was the greatest samurai who ever lived, an undefeated swordsman whose name still echoes through Japanese samurai history 7 centuries after his death, though most of the world has forgotten him. If you ask someone to name a legendary warrior from history, the same names come up every time: Leonidas, Alexander the Great, Caesar, Genghis Khan, Richard the Lionheart. Their exploits are taught in schools and embedded in popular culture. Samurai culture itself is enormously popular worldwide. And yet Miyamoto Musashi, Japan's own sword saint, the greatest samurai who ever walked the earth, is a legend in his own right that very few can name. He is one of the most remarkable warriors in all of human history, but he has been almost entirely forgotten outside of Japan. He was born in 1584 in the Harima province of southwestern Japan, at a time when the history of the samurai was not a museum exhibit, but a living, bleeding reality. Feudal Japanese warfare was constant and unforgiving. Power shifted through sword and blood. And into this world, Miyamoto Musashi arrived. He wasn't the son of a great lord or a man born into privilege. He was something rarer, a warrior built entirely by will. Musashi's biography is almost mythological in its sweep. He fought his first duel at the age of 13 and won. His opponent was a trained adult samurai. Musashi reportedly beat him to death with a wooden staff. From that moment, Miyamoto Musashi's story was set on a single trajectory, an unbeaten path through some of the most skilled swordsmen Japan ever produced. Most warriors of his era would consider a handful of victories in formal duels to be the achievement of a lifetime. Accumulating 62 means Musashi has no equal. After the Battle of Sekigahara in 1600, Miyamoto Musashi emerged as a ronin, a samurai without a master. Rather than seek employment under a new lord, he chose a different path. He walked Japan alone, seeking out the greatest swordsmen in history, challenging them to duels and sharpening his craft with every encounter. This period of wandering, known as Musha Shugyo, or a warrior pilgrimage, was the forge in which his legendary samurai status was truly cemented. He was not a political operator or a commander of armies. All he had was his blade, the road, and the relentless pursuit of perfection. By the time he was 30, Musashi had survived 60 duels without a single defeat. His unique fighting method, a revolutionary approach to sword fighting techniques, separates him from every other warrior in the ancient world. Where most samurai relied on one blade, Musashi developed a style that wielded two simultaneously. He called it Niten Ichiryu, meaning two heavens as one. His two-sword style combined a long katana in one hand and a shorter wakizashi in the other, flowing between offense and defense in a way opponents had never encountered and could not prepare for. Two blades moving as a single weapon. A philosophy made physical in the hands of a man who had mastered sword fighting better than anyone alive. There are few events more notable in all of the history of the samurai than his duel against Sasaki Kojiro. Kojiro was considered by many to be the greatest swordsman in Japan. A master of the long sword, a student of multiple schools, one of the greatest swordsmen in history who had never been beaten. His signature technique, the swallow cut, was said to be too fast for the human eye to track. The duel was set for the morning of April 13th, 1612, on the island of Ganryujima in southwestern Japan. Kojiro arrived on time, pristine and prepared, the very picture of the samurai code of honor, Bushido. Musashi arrived late. It was a deliberate strategic choice. He came by boat, and legend holds he carved his wooden sword from the oar during the crossing. When he stepped ashore, Kojiro was furious. Musashi was already winning, as psychological warfare was part of his strategy. What followed was something of a paradox, as it became known as one of the greatest and most famous duels in history. Yet, it was over in seconds. Musashi struck Kojiro with his carved wooden blade with such force and precision that Kojiro fell and never rose again. One of the most dangerous swordsmen in Japan was defeated by a man armed with carved wood. So why has the rest of the world forgotten Musashi? Unlike Alexander or Napoleon, Miyamoto Musashi never commanded armies or conquered territory that Western historians mapped and documented. He left no empire. His battles were personal, recorded in Japanese chronicles that took centuries to reach Western audiences. Japan itself was closed to the outside world for much of the era that followed his death, and his legacy stayed inside the country that created him. But Musashi's legacy goes beyond fighting. He was also a strategist and a philosopher. In his later years, he channeled everything he had learned across decades of Japanese warfare and hand-to-hand combat into a single written work, the Book of Five Rings. Completed just weeks before his death in 1645, the Book of Five Rings explained strategy, mindset, and the way of the warrior with a precision that still startles modern readers. Military commanders have studied it. Business leaders have applied its principles. Practitioners across the history of Japanese martial arts have treated it as scripture, one of the most enduring texts ever produced by one of the greatest warriors in history. The Miyamoto Musashi philosophy extended beyond combat. He believed that the Bushido samurai code of honor demanded total self-mastery, not just physical dominance, but the elimination of ego, fear, and attachment. He lived alone for stretches of his life, never married, and trained obsessively. He also created art, stunning ink paintings and sculptures that rival professional artists, born from his belief that mastery in one discipline informs mastery in all others. He was unquestionably one of the most complete human beings in all of Japanese samurai history. In the final years of his life, Musashi withdrew to a cave in southern Japan, and it was there, in silence, that he completed the Book of Five Rings and wrote The Way of Walking Alone, known as Dokodo, 21 rules for living without dependency, excess, or fear. They read less like a treatise on ancient warrior culture and more like a letter from someone who had survived hardship and distilled it into something full of meaning. The Japanese government would eventually honor him with one of the highest designations in the nation's cultural history, Kensei, or Sword Saint, a title given to only a handful of warriors across all of Japanese history. Legendary samurai warriors across the centuries have been celebrated for their bravery, loyalty, and skill. But when historians ask who was the greatest samurai, by definition, one of the deadliest fighters in history, the answer, almost universally, is the same: Miyamoto Musashi, undefeated and unmatched. If you want to understand what it means to emerge undefeated from a lifetime of mortal combat, to master sword fighting, and to leave behind a legacy that defined Japanese samurai history for centuries, there is no better place to start than Miyamoto Musashi. His story deserves to stand alongside every great warrior that history has ever given us.